Hey guys, my name's Luke. I decided after thinking about it for a long time that I wanted to make a video just about kind of how I got to where I am in my life, kind of the way that I think my mind works, um, just based on my life experience and kind of where I am today and the man I'm trying to be, the father, the husband that I'm trying to be. So I guess I'll start by saying I just grew up in like a pretty regular household. Um, my dad was always gone working, and so it's kind of just my mom most of the time. Um, my siblings and I were pretty far apart in age, so never. I mean, now we have a great relationship, but kind of growing up, it was always that age difference that kind of created a gap to where it was hard to relate to each other. Um, but other than that, a normal childhood. Um, I'm a Catholic. I was raised Catholic. Kind of got away from my faith a little bit in college, like a lot of people do. But I think there's something about being raised Catholic that created a seed of faith in my life that even when I was in a bad spot in my faith life, I think still I always kind of had a glimmer of faith there. Um, but I'll kind of detail that a little bit more later. Anyways, grew up playing sports, kind of like most kids do, and ended up playing a sport in college for a little while, and uh, kind of hung that up when I wanted to prioritize, partying or drugs and alcohol and things like that. Um, my wife and I met when we were in high school, and uh, she was a year older than me, and so we kind of started dating, kind of the summer of her, going to college, and we decided to do the long distance thing, and we did it for a little while, and it actually worked out really well. And we're married 5 years today with two kiddos, two little girls. So, but really, I just wanted to get on to talk about kind of really where I go, or where I go in my mind or in my actions um, every day to make sure I'm the best father and husband I can be when times are tough. Obviously, being kind of like in the Gen Z millennial, kind of right in the gap there, the affordability is not the greatest, and I know Gen Z is essentially like the poorest and most in-debt generation uh, in history. So, my wife and I have managed to get ourselves out of consumer debt, which is great. Um, Not to say that we're in anywhere near where we want to be financially, but um, we have two paid off cars. We have no credit card debt, no consumer debt, no student loan debt. We have a mortgage. That's about it. We both work, which kind of brings me to my next point is, how do young fathers handle like working with childcare? Because childcare is another thing that is insanely outrageously expensive in our world today. So I have a toddler that we have in daycare full time, and then we also have a 6-month-old that I watch 95% of the time while I'm working. I work from home in a sales job, which allows me the flexibility to watch her while I work, which has its perks obviously, but it's also really hard. Um, but I think what I've noticed kind of since she's been born in these last 6 months is that time has really slowed down. And I think when you get into like the monotony of some call it the rat race, or just like everyday life, things get really slow when they're not exciting or when the novelty's gone. It's crazy. Like as a kid, it seemed like time was moving so quickly, and the years were just flying by, and I think that's because we're so preoccupied with the novelty of being a kid and going through puberty, and talking to girls for the first time, and discovering things that every teenager kind of discovers, and then of course college, you carry on a new type of novelty in your life, and a lot of people change, and a lot of people kind of discover who they are, and I think most of all, people that had a faith life, kind of lose that in college, or majority of them do, and that was me for sure. I stopped going to church. I stopped really praying, or kind of even thinking about a higher power. And then I also kind of heavily got into smoking weed, which a lot of people do in college, and was smoking way too much weed at the time, but I just thought it was cool that I could smoke in my house whenever I wanted, and obviously that ultimately detracted me from playing the sport, because I wanted to smoke more weed and wanted to, couldn't leave my house unless I smoked weed. And then, that led to a lot of anxiety as you start to smoke a lot of weed, or kind of get older, get, I guess, some more responsibilities, or start to think more about the future of your life. And the weed kind of, exacerbates problems that, are there that you don't want to address. So I started to get real anxious and started to get depressed. The long distance with my now wife was kind of wearing on me. And started taking antidepressants, and that just kind of blanked everything out, like it does for a lot of people. And the way that you feel on antidepressants, as I'm sure many people that have taken them or on them now kind of realize, is that it really erases any feelings that you have. You don't have the weight that you had on you before, but you don't have really anything. There's really nothing that you're feeling. And I think after I got to that stage, I realized that is a really cold, low place to be. And to me, it was, I honestly wanted to, go back to the way I was and at least feel something, even if it wasn't the best feeling, or if, it brought me dread. I think I would rather, at that moment in my life, have felt dread than to feel the way that I felt while I was on that medication. And, there's other side effects with antidepressants too. The sex drive, or the performance in the bedroom can go down, and I did experience a little bit of that too, which can obviously affect a relationship, especially when you're only seeing the person, once or twice a month. So there was a moment where I was thinking about all that, and it all kind of came to a head, and I flushed all the pills down the toilet, which I know you shouldn't do, but I did, and then I never took them again. It wasn't that hard to get off of them, honestly, for me. I know it is for a lot of people, but I got off of them. I stopped smoking weed as much. Eventually graduated college in COVID, so no graduation ceremony. We went home for spring break, and they said, hey, you're not coming back. Nobody really knew what was going to happen, but all I knew is that I needed to get a job, and I ended up luckily getting a job. It wasn't the best job, but it was a job. And my wife and I both moved back home to our parents' house while we, got our things together like a lot of people do, before eventually getting our own home to rent for the first time. And that's kind of where you learn, if you can be in a relationship with someone, but then when you move in with them and you start to kind of see that the way that they act all the time, not just when you're together, you really get to start to know somebody. And I know that's killed a lot of relationships for sure, when people move in before they should. And we were engaged at the time that we moved in together. I think we were only like 4 or 5 months out from getting married, but it was definitely an experience. And that's when the financial questions start to come up. You find out that your wife may have certain things going on financially, or that you have certain things going on financially that you're keeping from her, which was the case. And I think it's the case for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't want to talk about money. And that's why it's the number one cause for divorce in America, is money issues. So we finally combined finances, and we weren't really working or we didn't really have a plan. We were still using credit cards. We had 2 paid off cars at the time, but eventually got a car loan. We didn't have a plan. We didn't know what we were doing with our money. We didn't have any goals. We were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, and we could pay rent, so we felt okay. My wife got pregnant about 6 months after we got married, and we started to really think about what is our life going to look like now that this child is coming. We were flying by the seat of our pants like a lot of people do. Still at this point not really going to church, not really in our faith journey that much. We got married in the Catholic Church, but we just kind of BS'd our way through the classes and went to church again for a little while, but stopped going shortly thereafter. Then we decided that we wanted a home for our kid and not a rental. We went and we bought a home. We bought the only house we could afford, which is still a great home. And at the same time, my wife decided that, and obviously I signed off on it too, it wasn't just her idea, but that we needed the safest car possible. So we went to the dealership, unfortunately, and left with a car note after only putting $1,000 down on an SUV. So we were doing the whole SUV thing and car payment thing, and just kind of living our lives. And and the baby came. And it changed our lives. It shook both of our faiths for the better. And I cannot recommend having kids more. I think everyone should have children. I think it's the most beautiful experience one could go through, and you'll never feel the love that you feel when you hold your child for the first time. So we had our kid, we had our mortgage, we had our car payment. We kind of slowly started to think about our finances more. And then about 6 months in to my child's life, I ended up getting in some legal trouble for some non-compete reasons in my occupation. So with a 6-month-old and 6 months into our first home, I was barred from working, and I was in the middle of a lawsuit that almost ultimately ended with us filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So luckily we made it through it, and didn't have to file Chapter 7, but had to get out of the industry I was in, and basically just find the first job that I could lean on in my personal network, and started commuting, an hour and a half both ways for a year and a half, while my wife was working nights as a nurse. So as you can imagine, the stress of that really decided to tear into our marriage. My wife's lack of sleep and lack of seeing her first child very much was really hurting us. And we kept our faith through that time, but it was really tough. And I just kept telling my wife it was only a season, but you can only say that so much to a young mother and wife who's working nights and sleep deprived and not seeing her child very much until she doesn't want to hear it anymore, and I don't blame her. So I think through that portion, those punches to the face really helped me deal with problems and future issues. So with all that to say, I think there's really no way to make it through this life without experiencing getting kicked in the teeth really, really hard multiple times. And there's really no other way to put it, that if you don't have the tool in your tool belt to know what to do when shit really hits the fan, it's tough. And that's what brings out a lot of anxiety and a lot of submission by young men, where they just give up. Whether it's giving up on the relationship, giving up on their children that they may have, giving up on their job, or giving up on their own life, and making the ultimate decision that too many men and a lot of young men make. So I was able to re-enter the industry that I was in, and things kind of got back to normal, and we got pregnant again, and now here we are 6 months into our second kiddo. In that same time, I discovered Dave Ramsey and a few other financial guys in that realm, and we paid off all of our consumer debt, and we're in a lot better spot today. And so just in the future videos, I'm kind of want to just talk about day-to-day life as a father, and finances, and how to make it, and also want to talk biblically, and kind of share how I kind of push through when times get tough, because they're always going to get tough. And this life is a suffering life, and this world is a world of pain and sorrow, and being a Christian is to suffer and to mourn the world and the things that are happening in this world. So I just want to leave you with my favorite Bible verse, and kind of something that I say to myself every day or when I pray, and it's Romans 12:2. And it says to not be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewal of your mind, and to be able to discern God's will, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. That verse will always be my favorite verse, because I've found in my short life and time as a father and husband that a lot of people want to keep up with the world and keep up with what it is supposed to mean to be a person at a certain age, or of a certain status, or to look a certain way. And really none of that matters. What matters is living the life that you're supposed to live through Christ, and in your own mind, which is to give all of the worldliness up, and to give all the vanity up, and to let your life be driven by Christ, and to accept His will, because He has a will for you and for everyone, and there's no stopping it. You can make decisions in your life because you have free will, and God will never take your free will. He'll always limit His own power for you to make your own decisions. But His will be done, and when you can accept that your life is essentially not your own, when you can accept that and know that there's a plan, things get a little bit easier day by day. And if you can live for today and the present, not worry about yesterday or not worry about tomorrow, and keep your eyes focused on today. It's another great verse. You know, today's got enough problems. Let's worry about today before we flip on over to tomorrow. So that's it, guys. I really look forward to doing this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and hope you guys are down in the comments section kind of talking about your own experiences and any issues or any good experiences or any ways that you've been able to kind of navigate this life as a young man. All right, see you guys later.